Well, Trump warned and warned that there would be tariffs. He warned us in November, saying January 20th was Judgment Day. Then he kicked the can down the road to February 1st, then to February 3rd. And indeed, he did announce tariffs, but they were gone within, I think it was 48 hours. But an enormous stress to the political class in Canada, and obviously worries to the actual business people of this country who would be hit with such a tariff. A tariff, of course, is a tax on Canadian products and services going into the United States. The tax would be paid on the U.S. side, so it would make money for the U.S. government at the expense of U.S. consumers. That would naturally push consumers towards made in America products or compel Canadian firms to relocate to the U.S. Of course, that doesn't work as well when, say, it's oil from Canada's oil sands, which can't really be replaced. America buys 4 million barrels a day from Canada. Not easy to source that quickly, and the oil sands themselves can't be moved. But if we have a reprieve, even if it's just 30 days, what has this whole imbroglio exposed? What has it taught us? What are the weaknesses we might consider fixing in case the tariffs do come again? Joining us now to talk about it is Jonathan Wellum, the president and CEO of ROCKLINC. You might know ROCKLINC because they are a sponsor of our show, and it's a pleasure to talk with the boss of ROCKLINC about his area of expertise. Jonathan, it's great to have you on the program. I talk about you all the time, but this is the first time we're actually connecting.
Thank you very much, Ezra. It's a pleasure to also speak with you and be on Rebel News. I really appreciate the Rebel News station and broadcast, and the information that you're communicating is absolutely essential for Canada, given the mainstream media is captured by our government and the left.
Well, I think you're right on that, and it's a pleasure to have a company that's aligned with our values. Thank you for that. Let's talk about the news. I think it was a panic moment for a lot of companies. I had friends who said they were considering relocating their whole business to the States because they couldn't survive with a 20%, 25% tack on of a tax. That may yet happen. What would your advice be for Canadian businesses, especially small businesses, that are worried about things? How do you stress test or stress proof a company, or are we going to be perpetually at the mercy of a tariff-happy president?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of issues there. I think if I were to step back for a moment, I mean, I think Donald Trump made it clear right from the outset, his key concern was the influence of China in Canada, and also the issue of drugs, fentanyl, which has been pouring into our country for a long time, at least the precursors, and then the assembly in our country has been pouring into our country from, through the West Coast, primarily through Vancouver. And then also in the last number of years, as you know, I mean, the ratcheting up of our immigration to just unbelievable numbers that are completely unsustainable, and the lack of scrutiny on who's coming into our country. And then, of course, those folks getting into the U.S. And so I think Trump's key issue is really drugs and the border, and so that I think is what we should be really focusing on in terms of the risk issues. And I think finally Trudeau came through at the last moment to address some of those issues, at least to enough to pacify Donald Trump and solve that issue for the time being anyway. But in terms of tariffs, they'd be devastating. The reality is it's like a 10-to-1 ratio. In other words, for every $10 we send down, they send back a buck to us. And we cannot compete with the United States on a tariff war. It would be a crazy thing to do. That doesn't mean we couldn't put some tariffs on. It doesn't mean that we couldn't push back a little bit. We would not want to push back full force, or we, I think, would be in serious trouble. Good news is it has exposed incredible weaknesses in Canada, which we've known about. I'm sure, Ezra, you've known about. The Conservatives generally have spoken about this, and that is that we've got a lot of assets that are landlocked in the center of our country. All these amazing resources, oil, potash, uranium, there's a whole host of different ones, especially oil and gas in particular. And we cannot get them to our coasts. And so this has raised a very important discussion, and I think we're going to be able to maybe finally get something done where we actually build the pipelines to the West Coast, pipelines to the East Coast, and we stop importing oil to this country, over 1 million barrels a day, into our East Coast, and we start to utilize our resources, and we can sell to other countries than just the United States. As much as we like the United States, it is craziness and really incompetence to be dependent on one country. They know that. And sort of the reality is that Donald Trump, as you know, is actually profiting off us when it comes to energy. We are subsidizing the United States, because when we send our oil from the oil sands into the U.S., it's largely trading at anywhere from a 15 to even sometimes it's been $20, $25 discount. And so we are very foolish. We've been incredibly incompetent. Trudeau has not allowed the money to flow into our resource sector to develop our assets, and that has to change. Along with some of the interprovincial restrictions, which I think people are also realizing that we don't even get along within our own country. This is insane. So these are good things, Ezra, I think, that have come up through the discussion. But I think the key one is fix our borders, and we've got to deal with these drugs that are coming in, the Chinese influence in our country.
Yeah. Stephen Harper was asked about this, and he said, were he prime minister now, this wouldn't have happened, as in things wouldn't have gotten so bad that the president would be just issuing public ultimatums on social media. And I believe him. I mean, Stephen Harper and Barack Obama were extremely different people. And I think they probably disliked each other in a personal way, but they never breathed a word of that. They were very professional. They had a working and respectful relationship. In fact, I remember that the Keystone XL pipeline was a real contentious issue. Barack Obama didn't actually kill it until after Stephen Harper was no longer prime minister. He had enough respect for the relationship he had with Harper that he wouldn't do that thing to Canada. Trump, I think, has no respect for Justin Trudeau. And that's spilled over to our country. I think Harper's right. I don't think, I mean, it was astonishing the other day to learn how long Trudeau went without even a basic phone call with Trump. And I'm not saying to suck up, but just to have a professional, working, regular, routine relationship with the U.S. president. I think Trudeau really gave into his, partisanness and said, well, I'm part of the anti-Trump world. And he would let things slip publicly. And I know they got back to Trump. Trump, has some vanity like all of us, maybe even a little bit more. I think Harper's right. I think, and maybe that's the answer to my first question. There's no real way to win in a tariff war with America. You can develop other markets, you can develop internal markets, but the real secret is don't get into a fight with America in the first place. And Harper managed that. Trudeau didn't.
No, I think your points are, I think you're dead on. I mean, the reality is, Ezra, we're seeing the difference between, real leaders and individuals who are pretending to be leaders. The Liberal Party, again, not to just scapegoat everything on the Liberal Party, we have in Justin Trudeau someone who never ran anything before. He's never signed the front of a check in his life. He's never had to manage a business or enterprise. And all of a sudden he becomes prime minister of the country. Yeah. He's also filled his cabinet full of incredibly incompetent people who have no track record in the areas in which they're governing. And this is a serious issue. You contrast that with Donald Trump, who's filling his cabinet with some of the premier individuals, people who have 10, 15, 20, 30 years of success after success after success. And that kind of contrast, we're seeing the difference between, real leadership and then sort of a DEI where you hire people based upon all of the wrong attributes and not on merit. Yeah. And certainly Donald Trump knows that Trudeau's weak, and he's definitely taking advantage of that and having a little bit of fun with it. There's no question about that.
Yeah.